welcome to One Love, One Connection, One Us with your host, Reverend Arlene Cahat.
And Reverend Harvey L. Bailey.
Arlene, how are you this evening?
I'm outstanding, but I'm not standing outside right at the moment. But, I'm feeling pretty good.
All right. Well, good. It's good to hear that. All right. So tonight we are going to have a special guest calling in, and she is going to talk to us about something very, very, very important. She's going to talk about how to deal with, some behavioral patterns that people have that may not be the best for relationships.
Okay.
What do you think about that, Arlene? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that the more help that people can get with that, the better off the world will be.
Well, that means that tonight we are going to do our part to make the world a better place then, right?
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. So,
okay.
Yes, I'm excited about this.
Well, good.
Yes, bring in more love.
Well, not only am we going to bring in more love, without further ado, I am going to bring in our guest, Miss Michael Anne. Michael Anne, are you there?
I am.
Well, how are you, Michael Anne Conley? How are you?
I'm loving everything so far, and we're only just getting started. Hi, Arlene.
We just getting started. Hey.
Is that cool?
The party is just beginning. And
well,
we are blessed to have you joining us for the party. Oh, you like that?
Thank you so much. I do. Well, you can always get me with a little bit of blues and a little bit of bass voice, I'm like in. I'm in.
Okay, baby, all right.
Okay, baby, all right. Yeah, okay, now you know my secret. Oh, God.
Now a lot of people know your secret. It's out. It's on the air.
It's on the air. Oh, my God. Bless me.
Michael Anne, tell us about you first. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
What I do.
What you do.
There's the doing thing and then there's the being thing, isn't there, Harvey?
All right.
Yeah,
there is.
The doing thing and the being thing. Yep. So what I bring into the world, what my gift is that I have a way and a resonance, particularly with women, who they get stuck in patterns of anxiety and overwhelm and a lot of, I call it overdoing stuff, over-managing other people, for instance, or overthinking things, or over-pressuring themselves to perform. It's like, okay, are you ready to get over all your getting overs? And I came by this naturally. You know how they say it's genetic. Because there's a number of things I say. One of the other things I say is you scratch an American and you find an alcoholic in the family somewhere.
Okay.
And it just so happens that in my family, my great-great-grandfather on my mother's side was, by all accounts, a drunk. And I found this out because my mother confessed to me that she knew that her mother and sisters threw their father out of the house because they didn't like the way that he was treating their mother, my great-grandmother. And so what I see in that family system is all the way down. It's like, oh, my goodness, we've got control freakness going on here, because that's what happens in families that have alcoholism. And it travels through the family even if you haven't lived with it yourself. So even though a few years ago, many years ago, more years ago than I'd like to mention, I started supporting women who are dealing with alcoholism and drug addiction, what I started to notice is that once that had kind of cleared away, there was all of this other stuff, all this overdoing stuff, overperforming, overspending, overeating, over. And I just started helping women get over all that. How's that? How'd I do?
That's pretty good. You're doing great. You're on the road. Keep it up. Don't stop. We want more.
Okay. So everybody listening in, just for a moment, just think. Sometime in your life, if you are not this person, and this could include guys too, by the way, Harvey, so you could, kind of be looking in the mirror if you want. But almost all of us have had an experience of knowing someone or being someone who apologizes a lot. I'm sorry for this and I'm sorry for that. Walking in the room and saying, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm late. Or, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot. It's like, I'm sorry is always there. That's a habitual pattern of diminishing yourself. And that's something that I think a lot of women do. Women may do it more than men do it. And it's something to get over. Or there's that performance thing where you know how to look good on the outside, especially on Easter Sunday. And on the inside, you don't feel so good about yourself. But you don't want anybody to know. You're kind of afraid that everybody's going to find out that you are a phony or a fraud, because somehow you're not measuring up to your own expectations. And nobody else is thinking this, usually. But a lot of women put themselves into that, overperforming, and at the same time putting themselves down, thinking of themselves as less than who they really are. Not being fully in that blessed person that they are, and not really believing that. And that's just really sad to me. That's just really sad to me that happens. And I found my way of working through that. And I just think that if you discover something, it's just not fair to not share.
Well, Michael Anne, let me ask you, how did you come to find your way? I mean, the story you tell is a very popular one. Like you said, I'm sure everyone listening can say they know someone, if not themselves, who fall into that. Mm-hmm. So what's your story? How did you come through this path and become who you are today?
Well, the first piece was I was born into a family that had a long history of women who are always in charge. And there are some things about that are really good, being in charge. We all know people or even come in families where women really were the ones who were the steady force in the family and made things happen. And we know many stories that are told by people of power about the strengths of their mother who was able to be in charge. And yet there's a shadow side to that, which is the need to be in charge and not being able to receive, not being able to let others join you in a certain way. And so I grew up, I was born the first child of 7, and I was followed by a few boys, just 3 of them, and then there was a couple of girls and then another boy. And back then, when I came up in the 50s, the oldest daughter is supposed to, she's like the junior mom. There's expectations of the oldest daughter. But at the same time, I was also smaller than my brothers, even though they were younger than me. So I grew up with this kind of this way. In fact, I write about it I wrote a chapter in a book. I co-author of a book that just came out called "Come Out of Hiding and Shine." And in my chapter, I talk about what it was like, the impact that it had on me, growing up hearing, "You're the oldest, you should know better." When you don't know better at all, you just have the pressure to be the oldest and to know something that you don't actually know. And so then you I learned how to perform at being the oldest and knowing better, even if I didn't know it myself. So I got early training in this because by the time I was 9 years old, I'd had 8 years of experience being the oldest. And when I was 14, my mother gave birth to her 7th and last child. So there was a lot of that pressure, and it wasn't all good for me, I would say. It wasn't all good for me to have that kind of pressure. And yet, that pressure led me to learning something about this. So, can we say it was bad? I don't think so. I don't think so. Does that make sense?
It does.
It does. Now, I have a question, though. I guess you can start with your own personal story about how did you start that sort of unlayering process of the parts that weren't necessarily working for you.
Yeah. Well, I was very unhappy as a child, and I was an angry kid. And in my 20s, I took all of that into doing something that I think a lot of kids do when they're angry. I used substances, alcohol, drugs, and things like that were not good for me. As a, it kind of numbs you out. You get to hide from what's really going on. And then in my mid-20s, I had an opportunity to begin to learn that there was another way, another possibility. I knew, but some of it was that I was so unhappy that there had to be another way. Do you know what I mean? In 12-step programs, they call it hitting bottom, where you just there's no place else to go but up. And I could see a life of enormous loneliness ahead of me, and I didn't want that for myself. And I also knew that I was just uncomfortable inside myself, and it was painful, very painful. I had also, at that time, I'll digress a little bit. When I was 16, my family experienced what most people would consider to be a tragedy, and it certainly was for us. The next brother, the second child, suddenly became ill, and very, very quickly, within a week or two of becoming ill, he died. And it was a mystery, and it was a source of great sorrow and pain in my family. I was 16, and I didn't have a clue about how to handle that grief, and so what I did is I buried it. And, I know that the alcohol and the drugs that I were doing, the ways that I was acting was part of that, running away from myself, numbing myself out so I didn't have to feel it. And then in my 20s, I had an opportunity to attend a workshop. Now, this was back in the 70s. And maybe there's people out there that were living in the 70s. I was living in the 70s. And this workshop led me to a new possibility, that there was some other way that I could learn to live and not be in quite so much pain. And I began a journey. I was 26 years old, and I began a journey of seeking my way out of all of that internal grief about my brother's death, about my anger over being pressured to know when I didn't. And that led me to seeking a professional path that was different. I was in my 20s. I was a journalist because I was still angry. I wanted to tell the truth to power, because that's what journalists did back in the 70s. Not so much anymore, unfortunately, but that's what they did in the 70s. They were truth tellers, and I wanted to be that. But that began to wear on me because I was doing some work for magazines and newspapers that were not honoring that. And so I became interested in health and nutrition at the same time as I was learning about new ways of thinking about myself. And this ended up being a path out of my pain and my sorrow, out of my depression and out of my anxiety, because I found people who were willing to hold me and guide me when I needed it the most, and who pointed me in directions, and then I chose to take those directions.
So, Michael Anne, how did you come to learn and put together or create what you now teach others?
I was really lucky, Harvey. I ended up in a master's degree program that had some academics for sure, but it also was actually an experiential program. It was like a shamanic journey, and a primary focus of this program was built on that old saying in medicine, physician, heal thyself. So there was an expectation in this program that each of us was on a personal journey, and we were going to do our own healing, and that you couldn't, under any circumstances, help others if you hadn't done your own work. And in that process, I was led by serendipity, or you might say it was a God shot in a way, is how some people call it. I was led into the field of alcohol and drug addiction. And it was a powerful, powerful gift to be brought into something that actually helped me and also helped me help others.
Okay. All right. And so, Michael Anne, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to want to hear about how you help empower women and some motivated men.
For sure.
Welcome to the Family Healing Circle, where we inspire awareness, manifesting, motivating, and educating every day. On Sundays, it's Make Me Feel It Radio with Stacey Ferguson. This show is starting a movement as it seeks to inspire people to grow and change the world through personal and financial development. On Mondays is Totally Whole with Pastor Cook and Dr. Maxine. This show addresses issues related to spirituality and mental health. On Tuesdays, it's Money Matters with Chastity A. Wells. This show will help you get your money right and your financial house in order. On Wednesdays, it's the RN Perspective with our own RN, Stacey Lamore. Change the way you think about health by understanding the connection you have with all things and how your habits affect your health. Learn to heal holistically. On Thursdays, it's 4 weeks, 4 different shows. 5 weeks, 5 different shows. The first Thursday of the month is Total Empowerment, where beauty and strength is enhanced inside and out with Angela Hardy. The second Thursday of the month is One Love, One Connection, One Us. Turn your relationship into a spiritual union with Reverend Arlene Cahet and Reverend Harvey L. Bailey. The third Thursday of the month is the Sacred Masculine Show with Reverend Jamel Gilliam, a show for spiritual brothers and the women who love them. The fourth Thursday of the month is the Inner Consciousness with Reverend Harvey L. Bailey. This show explores the inner world of our mind and gives advice on spiritual growth and self-healing. The fifth Thursday of the month is Healing Paradigm with Reverend Arlene Cahet, healing the mind, body, and spirit through changing viewpoints. On Fridays, it's Let's Talk Love, Sex, and Nutrition. It's sexual health and fitness like you've never heard it before with Vondria Walters and Zakia Lana. A family healing circle on Blog Talk Radio, 7 to 9 p.m. every day. And now you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Family Healing Circle Media. Family Healing Circle, healing the mind, body, and soul.
And we're back with our special guest, Michael Anne Conley. So, Michael Anne, tell us, how do you help women? What is it that you actually do?
Well, Harvey, one of the things that I've learned in 25 years of being a therapist is actually shocking that so many never really experienced being listened to, being heard in a deep way. And I know that the two of you do a lot of that in your work too. Would you say that? Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And to deeply see someone and listen to them, I would say this is unfortunate that I am often the first person that someone has that experience with. Their way of seeing themselves and the way that they've experienced themselves in their life isn't what I would call true seeing and true listening, to really get who someone is. So a big part of my work is developing a very deeply personal connection with someone and helping them see themselves. So there's that piece. I have a number of different ways that I do that, but one of the ways that it's really been important to me, I mentioned that master's program that I was lucky to be in that, had this experiential component. So maybe I should say a little bit about what that is. Would that be helpful? What I mean by experiential?
Please.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So we live in a world that is highly oriented toward cognition as the knower of truth. And so even I, that growing up, you're the oldest, you should know better, that knowing is something that we tend to default to as a mental thing. And yet the mind, or what we call the mind, is a part of a larger organism. And we have a word for that, but we tend to split those two. The word that we have for that larger organism is the body.
Okay.
So, so we tend to use words like I have a body. Well, who's the I and who's the body, right? And that's a phrase that people use, I have a body. Well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. That's not really, that's a massive groupthink that's been going on for years and years and years, that we have bodies. We are bodies. We are a fully functioning organismic being that contains specialized functions within it. And it's a magnificent creation. Would you not agree?
I would.
That we are.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Would you say that, Arlene? Yeah, this is
yes.
if you think about it, if you even step away from the spiritual, the whole spiritual piece about this is extraordinary. But if you step away from that and just think of what happens in the physical form of a body, which is literally changing shape over something we call time. We are shape changers. And you can see that if you look at a photo album of your life, and you could see who you were at 2 and 3 and 5 and 7 and 9 and 30 and even beyond that you see this story of changing shapes. And that is a vessel that is, it's a temple, actually. One of the great masters of the West, great master of, the Western world in the sense of from the Golden Crescent in the Mediterranean area, said the kingdom of heaven is within, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And what actually did he mean by that? Well, short of calling him up on the phone and involving him in this Blog Talk Radio, I don't know that we're going to get him live. But
well, I think Arlene and I, we might know somebody who could channel them.
Yeah, we could do that, but it would be a faint representation. So, as a child of God myself, let me give it a shot. Which is, I believe that when he said the kingdom of heaven is within, he was saying that the being that you are is a temple. It is a resource. It is an elegant exemplar of the life force, right? That's what I would say. And what we have done, unfortunately, is we have relegated this extraordinary temple, this vessel, to being a sideshow that's just basically a vehicle just carrying around this thing we've called a brain. So we're all just like walking heads, right? In some way or another. Even athletes. You know, just go to a mall. Go to any mall. I invite anybody here. Next time you're at a mall, just go sit down. You know, step away for 15 minutes from your rush to go and get something. And just sit down and just watch all of the walking heads. People who are not, you can tell, they're walking and they're running themselves from their brains. And they're not in touch with this vessel that is an extraordinary organism that actually created its own brain. Over time, it created this function of feedback loop. So what I'd say is what we call the mind, that thing that gets busy, you know, yap, 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 yap.
Mm-hmm.
The Buddhists call it busy mind, but, you know, we say busy, that we are constantly in this dialogue inside this busy state of ourselves without listening to the signals that are coming from elsewhere. And in fact, the mind is, go ahead.
Oh, no, you finish that. You finish that because I want you to finish where you were going.
Okay, so I was going to say that we've become socialized to treat our minds as a dictator that is telling us what to do. I got to lose 10 pounds. I got to stop doing this, or I should do that, as if it was in charge, when in fact that's not its function. Its function is to listen to the signals from the entire organism and feed back suggestions that might help things work more fluently.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with that. So tell us, you know, let's drill down to it. If I'm one of these motivated men, because I'm not going to be a woman, not at least in this conversation. You know, I have been in other conversations. You know, a month ago I was Arlene. but today I'm going to stay gender appropriate. And so if I'm one of the motivated men and I'm working with you, what exactly is it that you're going to help me you're going to help me do to become empowered? What could I expect?
Yeah, well, the very first thing is I'm going to ask you some questions that you probably don't have answers for.
Okay. Questions
so
like what?
Here's a question like, how are you using yourself right now? Now, that is not a typical question because most of us don't think of ourselves as beings that are using ourselves. So then I ask, how are you using yourself right now? And then I say, it's okay to say I don't know. So the orientation is, let's find out how you're using yourself and guide you to influence that. Now, what I've learned from my mentors is that satisfaction is much more important than happiness. Would you be interested in knowing why?
Sure, I would.
Okay. So happiness is something we're all seeking. In fact, it's written into the Constitution of the United States that we have the right to happiness, to the pursuit of happiness. Well, that's the problem. Happiness is something you're pursuing. It's always like that carrot on the stick. And you have moments of happiness, and it typically is fleeting. So we have an experience of happiness as something that happens to us instead of something that we generate from inside us. I'm not saying that that couldn't change, but that's the way most of us tend to think about happiness. We have an association, a rhythm of thinking about happiness. Satisfaction, however, comes from how you manage yourself in a situation, regardless of whether it's a happy situation or not. So our topic here is about relationships and ways that people will sabotage themselves or even destroy their relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know about you, but I've been in a relationship where there was a fight going on. Yeah? Is that familiar?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah? There's a
I
fight
fought
going
with myself plenty of times in relationships. It shows up in the world as me fighting with the other person.
Well, exactly. Yeah, you got that right. Yeah, fighting with the other person. Well, the thing is that in that fight with that other person, sometimes that other person's fighting with you, and you've got a situation that it's kind of hard to resolve because you both have a point of view. Cases, each person could have a valid point of view.
Mm-hmm.
But and you can't change that other person. You could potentially influence them, but you're not going to influence them by trying to influence them. The way you influence them is by changing yourself. Right? You set an example. Correct? So I have been in situations where there was nothing I could do. I was completely powerless over what the other person believed, over the way that they acted, over the way that they treated me. So what I was left with is influencing my own attitude and behavior in relationship to that person. So there are situations when what we take away from a difficult, challenging situation is that, wow, that was rough, and I feel really satisfied about how I handled myself in it. And that is, for me, that is the ultimate goal, is to know that you have managed yourself in a situation in such a way that you feel deeply fulfilled and satisfied, even if you didn't get what you wanted from the other person.
Okay.
So,
all right.
So
and Michael Anne, I want to open the lines up because I think we might have some people who want to ask you some more questions along that line. So for our callers out there, if you have any questions for Michael Anne, just go ahead and press 1 on your phone, and then we'll go ahead and bring you in. All right. And so, Michael Anne, while we're waiting for some calls, go ahead and finish what you're saying.
Okay. So, So in these beliefs that we have, that the mind is the one in charge, we have forgotten that the mind is there to serve. True leaders find out where their followers want to go, and then they lead them there, right? Mm-hmm. That's what a real leader does. Mm-hmm. Martin Luther King was a leader who saw what was happening and found a way to bring us forward through that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So leaders, real leaders serve. They don't dictate. They serve. And so if we use our minds as a dictator, we're not serving ourselves and we're not serving others. So this invites us to connect with what's really going on inside that kingdom. And there is a way to do that is so powerful and elegant. I share it. And that is muscular action patterns.
And what is that?
Well, right now, you're probably doing something that uses muscle, right? You're sitting.
Yeah. I'm standing, yeah.
Okay, so you're standing. Okay, so in order to stand, actually, Harvey, can I use you as an example? And you can share with us what your experience is? Okay. Since you're standing, what I'd like for you to do right now is lock your knees and brace your back.
Okay.
Just lock your knees and notice what happens physically when you do that, and tell us what you notice.
Yeah, I feel tense.
You feel tense, right? Okay. Now tune into your feet right now, and soften your knees, and tell me what happens with your feet.
Well, when I soften my knees, I get a better, like a grip on I'm more solid on the floor, and also my feet become more comfortable.
Yes. So even though when you are standing with your feet locked, even though your feet are on the floor, you're not connected to the floor as much as when you soften that tension, right?
Right.
So when you're in that mall and looking at people, you're going to look at a lot of people who are walking braced and locked, and they're not connected to themselves physically. And we even see that in athletes. I've worked with athletes who know how to perform athletically, but they are not tuned in muscularly to a connection that's between the mind, the heart, and the muscle. And that's the emotional state. They can perform.
Okay.
They can do what they need to do. They can push through. Plenty of people just push through, and they do what they need to do. We all use ourselves muscularly every day because of habits. You know, we have the body generates these subroutines so that we can get out of bed in the morning. So we don't have to do Groundhog Day. You know, what do I do now? You know,
Groundhog Day wasn't exactly all that bad. He got the girl, he got the money.
I know.
He had to repeat it a few times, but
he had to. Yeah, right. Well, just imagine if you had Groundhog Day just on how to get out of bed. Imagine that. In fact, this is what happens in the first 3 years of life. You know, picture that little baby. And what does the baby do? After a certain bit of time, that baby is learning to roll over, learning to sit up, learning how to stand, and then it fall down, go boom, you know, and it doesn't necessarily cry when it falls down. It gets back up, and all of that is muscular action. And then we get that little brain working, and we forget that the brain has a partner. The brain has a partner.
Right. And Michael Anne, I got a caller on the line who wants to talk. Hold on a minute here while we bring the caller in. Caller, you're on the line, number ending in 1832.
Peace and blessings to you, Brother Harvey and Arlene. Well, love to you.
Peace and blessings. How are you today, love?
I am grateful. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you for having Michael Anne on. And Michael Anne, I thank you so much for being with us tonight. I am learning quite a bit from you, and so just wanted to, I did want to ask you a question, if I may, with regard to, you've worked in the addiction community. And my question would be, people who are experiencing addiction, how do they sabotage their relationships, and how can the ones who are in a relationship with them not sabotage themselves, I guess is my question.
Well, that's good, too. You recognize that they sabotage themselves, too, right?
Yes.
They're not just sabotaging their relationships, but they're sabotaging themselves. Tell me your name.
I do apologize. My name is Zakia. It's Z. Most people call me Z.
Did I Zakia?
Zakia, yeah.
I love that. I love that, Zakia.
Thank you.
So let's note that there's a whole range, a whole continuum around addictions, and I say from the simply annoying to the seriously life-threatening. And that a lot of times when we're talking about addictions that are really destructive, we're talking about the usual suspects: alcohol, drugs, pills, smoking, and even food can be a serious addiction that is life-threatening, that kind of thing. And the vast majority of us are somewhere in the middle between the simply annoying, like chewing your fingernails, that kind of thing, where you're never going to get a DUI from chewing your fingernails. But most of us, the vast majority of us, are dealing with habitual patterns that we feel addicted in, that we are not necessarily in control of them. The habit has us rather than us being in charge of that. And when you get that hooked, it becomes the primary focus. So let's say, Zakia, let's say I am super, super focused on needing to tell you what to do because I know better than you do what you need to do. Have you ever known anybody like that?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Yeah. We know. Yeah, it's like, yeah, me too. Me too. So if I know better than you and I am so attached to that, I'm going to, like tightening and squeezing like Harvey when he was locking his knees. I'm going to tighten and squeeze myself in such a way that I can't open my heart to you as a being who has her own rhythm and her own knowledge and her own wisdom. And that's going to shut me down from seeing you and hearing you. And it's going to shut down the possibility of a deep connection between us. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so we call it, technically, on a medical level, an addiction has a specific pattern that is biological. But there is a recognition, like, for instance, more recently, that the behavior of gambling is actually recognized that it changes the neurotransmitters in the brain so that we can broaden our definition of an addiction as being something that is deeply embedded and it comes first over and above anything else. And so a lot of times we'll have people who are dealing with those life-threatening addictions, the alcoholic, for instance, or the drug addict. And that's so primary for them that they will do anything to get that, and they will sacrifice their relationship with you or with anybody else. They will put that addiction first. What's harder to see is those addictions that are about overdoing and overperforming and over-controlling, because after all, I'm just being helpful, aren't I? I mean, I know what you need, and I'm just being helpful. So it's actually harder in some ways to deal with those addictions because we're in denial of the deficit. We're in denial of the price that it costs us around that. Is that a good start around your question, Zakia?
Yes, and I get the part about with the other person. So how, as the person that's in relationship, not sabotaging ourselves.
Yeah. So this is what makes it harder, actually, because we can live without alcohol and drugs, but we can't live without food and we can't live without relationship, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So if you've got someone who's got an addiction to something that actually isn't necessary for life, watching too much television, or yelling and screaming, or drinking, using, those kind of things, and you're in relationship with that person, then what tends to happen is the temptation to start building up a lot of resentment and anger because that person isn't dealing with their stuff, and trying to change them instead of recognizing that the first place that we need to start is by changing ourselves. And the tricky part is, how do I change myself without having it be like, wait a minute, why am I doing all the work? They're not changing, and I'm doing all this stuff, and why do I have to do it all? I heard that a lot. And that's a trap that those of us on this side of the equation fall into, that they are doing something that's really bad. I'm not doing anything bad. I just want them to stop doing that. And yet it doesn't help if we overly focus on their behavior instead of focusing on ourselves. So the attempt to tune in to what you're feeling physically is really important, because we get all wound up in that little mental thing, busy. I'm just thinking about him and her or what they're doing, instead of what's happening in me right now. And even that, if you if you actually experience feelings are something that no one can take away from you. So if you tell me right now, I feel sad right now, I could say, no, you don't feel sad, but then I'm just being that controlling person, right? Because no one can take your sadness away from you. But if you say, that person is making me do this, well, I could question that. I could say, wait a minute, what are they doing to make you do this or make you feel this way. So in starting with ourselves, what I found is it's a lot easier to work with those physical sensations. Start there instead of working with the mind, because the mind is just all over the map. It's just bouncing around. It's hard to grasp. That's because nervous system tissue works at a higher frequency than physical tissue. And that's where muscular action patterns come in. So could I give you an example? Would it be okay if I gave you an example?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm in a situation, say I'm going to go back to a situation I was in with somebody, and they were enraged, and there was no reasoning. There's no reasoning to a person who's enraged. In that moment, what I did, because I had learned how to do this, is I just tapped into where I was feeling the tension. And then I have a practice that I learned and that I teach about how to modulate that contraction so that I wasn't stiffening myself in response to this person's rage. While I'm in it and thinking, okay, am I going to stay in this room or am I going to leave this room? Sometimes, somebody's enraged, you leave the room, they just follow you. You walk out the house, they just follow you, right? So you're using your mind, but at the same time to be able to untense the stress that you're in helps your mind think more clearly about what to do. And in that situation, I decided not to leave because I had some things I needed to do in relationship to this person, and if I walked out, I'd be closing the door forever, and I wasn't ready to do that. But I knew I was making that decision not out of just spinning in my head, but because I was working with myself physically so that I could reduce the tension in myself. It was very, very powerful. It was one of those situations where I couldn't control the other person, but I could influence myself.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, and thank you for that example. And I guess I would even include in that taking those deep breaths that that we know are so very important. So thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Really fun.
Thank you so much, Zakia. That's a good reminder to always take those deep breaths.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you. And thank you, Harvey and Arlene, for having me.
You're welcome.
Blessings to you.
Zakia, thank you for being on the show, and you saw the text, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay, cool. All right. And Michael Anne, Zakia she's a part of the Family Healing Circle family. She's actually one of the hosts of one of the shows on the Family Healing Circle. Zakia, go ahead and plug your show real quick.
Okay,
tell us about it.
Yeah, so Michael Anne, and for all those others who are listening, I am co-hosting with my beautiful friend Bonnie on Friday nights at 7:30, our first and third Friday of the month. And if there's a fifth Friday, we're on the fifth Friday, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time on Let's Talk Love, Sex, and Nutrition. Let's Talk Love, Sex, and Nutrition. And we are so blessed to be able to have amazing conversations and guests who talk about those three things. Love, we love talking about love, and we absolutely love talking about sex. and we learn and grow through that. And then also my beautiful friend Bonnie is a health and wellness coach, and she loves talking nutrition as well. So come join us next Friday, not tomorrow, but next Friday, 7:30 p.m. on the same number that you called in tonight.
Yeah,
and
that's great.
Let's Talk Love, Sex, and Nutrition. Thank you so much, Harvey. And we will welcome you, Michael Anne, to join us.
Thank you, Zakia. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Peace and blessings.
Yeah.
Peace and blessings, love.
Peace and blessings.
All right. And so, Michael Anne, we are getting close to wrapping up. Is there an exercise that you can walk us through just to kind of get us feeling more in touch with our bodies?
Well, actually, there is, and I want to take off on what Zakia was talking about, the breath, which is a really a really good place to start because all of us are doing it all the time, right?
Yeah, we kind of have to. People have tried going without, and they tend to pass out.
Yeah, right. Well, it's the interesting thing about the breathing mechanism because breathing is something that is both involuntary, meaning it just happens from the moment of our first breath until we take our last, but it's also something we can influence. Take a deep breath, right? There's another thing about breathing that most of us don't focus on that I really like to introduce people to. So can I walk us through that, and we can kind of, the three of us can do it together, and anybody else listening in can go along with us? Okay. So most breathing exercises will kind of set a standard for a way to breathe, and this is not that kind of exercise. This is an exercise in noticing what is, no matter what it is, and not changing it with any intention. Just be attentive right now to your breathing. It's like there's no perfect way to breathe, there's no right way, there's no wrong way, there's just the way you're doing it now. And as you do this breathing without any kind of special additions, just notice what is moving in you. And I will give some examples of things that people have shared with me. So in noticing what's moving, as you breathe, you might notice perhaps the rising and falling of your chest.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just notice that there's movement happening there, right? Sometimes people will say, I can feel the movement of air into my nose as I breathe in, or out of my mouth as I breathe out, or the other way around, whatever it is, just noticing the movement. And sometimes people will notice movement in their belly as they breathe, just normal, everyday, average breathing, not trying to make it perfect or anything. What we don't tend to do is notice further beyond that. So I'm going to invite you to notice, as you breathe, notice the movement in your back. And this might be a little bit easier if you're sitting in a chair with a back on it. But even so, just allow yourself to become aware of movement in your back. So physically, the body has lungs, and the lungs are encased in a barrel. We call that the rib cage. And most of the time when we do breathing exercises, we are focusing on the forward movement of the breath in the front of us. But we don't realize that the lungs are moving in all directions. They move back. So just feel the movement in your back. They move up, so you might notice that maybe there's a lift in your shoulders. They move diagonally or to the sides. You might even notice movement as you become more aware of movement in the side of your trunk up against your arms, or even the movement of your arms, whether you are intentionally moving or not. Your breath is moving you up, down, side to side, forward and back, in all directions. There is movement when you breathe. And that is a way to connect with the bodying of breathing, not just breathing to settle your mind, which is all good, but not just breathing to deeply breathe to calm yourself, but actually to feel the movement in you just from breathing. There we go.
Okay. Harvey, are you there?
How was that?
I am. That was good.
How was that?
Yeah.
Could you report back?
Good.
Tell me a little bit.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what you experienced. I'd love to hear that.
Go ahead, Arlene.
I have to say I didn't actually participate in the exercise, but what the thought that actually really did come to mind is that one of the terms that I believe that's used in yoga about the body mind, where you're causing the body to release the stress, the tension, and the things of that nature. And so I think that while you were talking, my mind went back to the knowledge that I already had about what it was that you were sharing with us.
And that's movement too, because the mind is moving.
Okay. All righty.
Yeah.
I felt it very calming and peaceful. I could feel energy rising up in the body as you were doing it. So it was pretty nice. It's pretty good. Now, Michael Anne, let us know, how can we get in touch with you? Where are you hailing from?
Well, I am on the left coast, as we
the left
say.
coast. Not the west coast, but the left coast.
Well, you could call it the west coast, but I like to think of it as the left coast, especially in these times. The left side of the map as you're looking.
Getting a little political there.
Yes, well, let's just leave it at that. let's just leave it at that. We want to breathe together. We want to breathe together over the next 2 weeks. Let's just breathe together, brothers and sisters. Yes. So I am in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is a lovely part of the country. And I have a practice. I have a health center that I founded here 23 years ago. And then I have my practice in helping people overcome their overdoing and their overperforming, all of the anxiety and overwhelm that they put themselves through. And I'd love to share a link that I have on my website. If somebody wants to engage in a more personal and private conversation, to have that conversation.
Sure, go ahead.
Would that be okay? My website is Habits into Health. That's HABITS, habits, and then the word into HEALTH.com, and then / the word breakthrough. Like we all want to break through those habits that don't serve us. Breakthrough, BREAKTHROUGH, and then a little hyphen, and the word consultation. And if you can't remember that, just go to habitsintohealth.com and click the Get Support button. What I'm doing this fall is something really special. I'm so excited about it because all of my people that overdo and are overspending particularly, we get into the holidays, it's like a freeway. It's like a packed freeway. One holiday after another. It's never ending from October through January, through the middle of January, until we get a rest with our special day in the middle of January, And all of this leads people to really overdo. So I'm scheduling some holiday habit makeover sessions to help people get through the holidays without regret and grief and anxiety, so that they can have a holiday that's filled with love and peace and calmness.
Okay. All right. And would you like to give out your number or web address?
Just Habits into Health is the web address, HABITS, intohealth.com. And my phone number is 925. Here in the U.S., that would be, if you're listening from outside the U.S., you do +1, and then 925-262-4848, and that will get you to my voicemail.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael Anne. We appreciate you being here with us this evening, spending this time with us, and enlightening and educating us on some things, and especially that exercise. Hopefully, everyone in the listening area did that exercise with Michael Anne. If not, you still have a chance to reach out to her. She gave you her information, and she can help you with that exercise and a lot more. Right?
I hope I'm here to share what I.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael Anne. All right.
So
And
much,
so,
Robbie.
Arlene, you're welcome. Arlene,
Yes.
is there anything that you got going that you'd like to share with everyone?
No, not at the moment. Although next month, we will be having a show that I think I'm going to call don't cause yourself more pain.
Don't cause yourself more pain.
Mhm.
All right. And that's going to be next month right here on Blog Talk Radio?
Blog Talk Radio. Yeah, that'll be next month, the second Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. with myself and you, Reverend Harvey L. Bailey.
Hey, I'm going to be there. All right.
Hey, you're going to be there.
Cool. I look forward to it.
Yeah. And yourself, Harvey, what do you have going on?
Well, on Sunday, October 23rd, I am going to be at the Spiritual Empowerment Center, sort of a homecoming for me. I'll be at the Spiritual Empowerment Center. I'll be delivering the message that day, so come on out and hear Reverend Harvey speak. Also, afterwards, I will be doing a free workshop called The 7 Pillars of Self-Love. 7 Pillars of Self-Love. Learn to love yourself better. That's Sunday, October 23rd. It's at 4701 Yellowwood Avenue in Baltimore, Maryland, 21209, and service begins at 10:30 in the morning. Also, on Halloween, I will be doing a balancing your male and female energies with, or should I say at, Indigenal. Indigenal is on Reed Street. Why I don't have that address? Arlene, what is the address for Indigenal? I know you know it.
Not by heart.
Not by heart. Okay. So let's stall while I pull the address up. It is in Baltimore, Maryland, downtown Baltimore, Maryland, on Reed Street. And that's going to be Halloween, and we start at 6:45 p.m. I'm still trying to get that address. And so that's what I have going on, at least for right now.
Okay. Beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, it's at 213 West Reed Street, Baltimore, Maryland, 21201. That's 213 West Reed Street, and it is Halloween night at 6:45 p.m. I'll be doing a Balancing Your Male and Female Energy meditation. Okay. So, Arlene, any closing words you want to share before we go ahead and walk away for the night?
No, not really. But again, in order to have a relationship with others, you need to start with yourself first. Begin loving yourself, healing yourself, and unlayering yourself to get to your authentic self. To be the best that you can be, and I think all things sort of fall into place, and understand that it's always an ongoing process.
All right. That's beautiful. I have nothing to say other than I co-sign on that, and I love you all. Good night, and we'll do this again in 2 weeks, right here on Blog Talk Radio with The Inner Consciousness. Have a good evening.
Peace and blessings, everyone.